everybody. So today we're going to talk about how the tide in the World War One is going to fundamentally change and how quickly the war ends once America gets involved. So we've been talking about some new technology. The tank here is the best possible solution to the machine gun in World War One. So when America shows up, all right, it's just wrecking shop. And while we as Americans want to be like, woo, America, get some, understand the reason that happened is because America is so much more fresh and not worn out from the war and disease and all this other stuff that is just plaguing all the other people. So when we show up, we're just energized troops and very quickly just dominate here in World War One. So the question here is even though Russia backed out as America arrives in World War One, why was the arrival of Americans such a powerful weapon against the Central Powers? So the reason they're such a powerful weapon, even though Russia did back out, they had their own treaty, they backed out of the war, is that America is fresh and we're not worn out from war and disease. So that is why. Also, on a completely side note, want to mention, so as I'm going through here and talking about these questions on each one that are on there, we are in the next unit, since we're going to be in unit 6, 7, and 8 after this unit. All right, I want to start not going through the questions and having them up here, start preparing you for your sophomore year and your junior year and all that as we go through. So this will be the last unit in which we will stop and specifically talk about the questions. So I'm still going to teach the way I always have, and you're going to have the questions in front of you. You just need to start getting used to answering those as we go through. So I'll make sure I answer all the questions, but I want to actually stop at a slide that has the question on it after this unit. There's a couple interesting things that take place in World War One. So the soldiers in the trenches don't hate each other. They're just trying to survive. The trench warfare is awful and everybody's struggling, trying to do their same thing the same way. The best example of this is how miserable it was in the trenches and how both sides just wanted to stop fighting, is that since the predominant religion in all the countries fighting was Christianity, on Christmas Day, there would not be any fighting in World War One. Like, everybody agreed not to fight. So much so, after the first year on Christmas Day, both groups, and this is crazy, but it kind of sets the feeling of what it was like at the time. Troops would come out of the trenches during the day, and they'd go in the middle of no man's land, and they'd clean it up, they'd bury bodies and stuff like that. Then, all right, the two armies would play soccer all day against each other. Like, hey, no war today. And then the next day they go back and the war's back on. Like, it just seems incomprehensible, but it just goes to show that the actual soldiers, they didn't hate each other. They're just being forced to do a job. And if they don't have to do it, they're going to take some time off and go play with the guys across the way. It's really crazy. So finally, after Germany realizes they can't win, America shows up just crushing everybody, that they are going to sign an armistice. Means Germany is going to sign an armistice, all right, on November 11th, 1918 at 11 o'clock a.m. That means at 11 a.m., November 11th, 1918, so the 11th hour, the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, Germany admits that they lost. There's no more fighting. Now, the treaty that's going to end this war, like who's punished for what, how do we fix this going forward, that's going to take like another 6 months to talk about. But the armistice is what we celebrate. And this is what Veterans Day is on November 11th. You're never in school. November 11th every year is Veterans Day, and it's in honor of the armistice. This is the day at 11 a.m. You're done. If you're in the trenches, go home. There's no more fighting. So the armistice just means a ceasefire, and Germany acknowledges that they lost. The treaty, which is going to take 6 months, and it's going to be a really, really long, drawn-out process. The treaty that's going to take 6 months is going to be intricate, and it's called the Treaty of Versailles. All right, but what we honor in World War One and what we have holidays for is when the soldiers, there's millions of soldiers, could just pack up and go home, which is what the question here is what's the difference between an armistice and a treaty? An armistice is a ceasefire, which means they just agree to stop fighting. There's not going to be any more fighting. Everybody can go home. They usually acknowledge who a loser is. In this case, Germany acknowledges that they lost. And then the treaty is going to be a long, drawn-out process to who has to pay for what has to happen, how do we prevent this in the future. All the politician stuff is a treaty. The armistice is the part that comes before the treaty in which they say, we're not fighting, go on home. So the 11th hour of the 11th month the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, November 11th, 1918, the official end of World War I. Now, there's this thing called the Spanish flu. All right, if y'all did the very first assignment that we were out, we talked about this, and this is where one of the reasons that we're on quarantine now is to prevent something like this from happening again. So the flu, everybody started getting sick in the trenches of the Spanish flu. It's a version of the flu that people weren't familiar with, kind of like how the coronavirus, tons of coronaviruses, like that's not like a new word, but the coronaviruses, this is a new strand of it that people aren't used to. All right. So just like this, there's a version of the flu it's called the Spanish flu, but it doesn't. It has nothing to do with Spain. It ended up hurting Spain the worst, so it's called the Spanish flu, but it didn't originate in Spain. So all the soldiers started getting sick in the trenches at the end, and then the war ends and everybody goes home. They spread this flu around the world. Now, here's why we're quarantined now, all right, is to prevent what happens in America at the time, all right? 500,000 Americans are going to die of the flu. 30 million people are going to die around the world from it. All right. This is just shocking. Like, oh my gosh, was it like the plague? Was it? No, it was bad. It was a bad flu. Here's what happened. Since they didn't quarantine, like in St. Louis, they did. They just kind of kept everybody home and everything was fine. Everybody got sick at the same time. That was a huge problem. There was no way to get medical treatment. All right, because everybody was sick at one time. Nobody was able to get the help they needed to recover from the flu because everybody was sick and it just shut down society. And a lot of people died who should not have died had they had medical treatment. So the flu epidemic was just devastating the world over this particular year, 1918 to 1919, the wintertime of 1918 to 1919, absolutely devastating. More people died from the flu than did in all of World War I. It's absolutely crazy how that happened. This is why we've learned so it seems like we're overreacting to coronavirus. At least at the time I'm recording this a couple weeks in advance. Hopefully that's still true. But not necessarily overreacting, but because we're being proactive. We're preventing it from getting as bad as it was at this time when you didn't do anything like Philadelphia. They went through and had a parade. And everybody got sick in Philadelphia. There was no medical community because they were all sick too. And so many people died unnecessarily because they couldn't get medical help. By quarantining people will eventually get sick and it's fine. But like in St. Louis, they continued to get sick for about 6 months. In Philadelphia, everybody got sick in the same month. But the problem was in that 1 month, nobody had any help and tons of people died. In St. Louis, when they got sick gradually over a 6-month period, whenever you got sick, you went to the doctor, they gave you medicine, and most people survived. So we have learned from the flu epidemic today over how that can happen and what we need to do to fix it. So number 16, how is the flu spread around the world so quickly in 1919? The flu was spread around the world. Sorry, got a bug in my throat. The flu was spread around the world so quickly in 1919 because the soldiers started getting it in the trenches, and then they were like released to go home. So they just spread it like instantaneously around the world. And then countries didn't have a plan for how to deal with a pandemic like that. So they just went about their regular lives. And then you get like pictures like this. This is like a gymnasium. Like everybody that's sick just goes here. There's no hospital beds. There's no nothing. The doctors are getting sick. There's no supplies. There's no nothing because everybody got sick at one time, and it's a huge, huge issue that takes place during World War One. All right. So the winners decide. So after World War One, you got to figure out who's to blame for this. So what's going to happen is there's going to be this huge treaty called the Treaty of Versailles. All right, it's spelled the Treaty of Versailles, but it's pronounced the Treaty of Versailles. Here's what's crazy about the Treaty of Versailles. There's only 4 countries that are allowed to decide what the outcome, the long-term outcome of this war is going to be. All right. It's important to note who is not allowed to be here when they decide what the punishments are for the losers of this war. First, Russia, not allowed to be here. If you remember, Russia had already backed out of the war with the Communist Revolution. All right, so they're gone. They backed out before the war ever ended, so they don't have anything to do here. They already have their treaty. They just gave Germany whatever they wanted. They dipped out. So Russia's not there. The most important one that's not allowed to come is Germany. Germany's the one that lost. All right. Germany's the one who gets blamed for this whole war. Germany didn't start it. Remember, Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Bosnia with Serbia, and then Russia got involved, and then Germany got in later. But Germany, most of the people who died from the Allies did so at the hands of the Germans. So Germany gets blamed for this. So Germany's not allowed to show up. All right. The only people that are allowed to show up are the big 4, is what they're called. Now, I want to clarify, there were other countries that came, but they weren't allowed to talk, and we're going to talk about them. So the big 4 here are the big 4 countries that show up. All right. It's America, all right, England, France, and Italy. These are the big 4 that show up, and they're going to decide the fate for Germany after World War One. So Woodrow Wilson, who's the president of the United States, he sees this. He wanted to stay out of it. The Lusitania, all this stuff happened. He's got to show up and save everybody. So he's like, well, dang. All right. I got to go fix all this too. So Woodrow Wilson takes this job very seriously as he just goes across the Atlantic Ocean on a boat. And on his way over there, he comes up with his 14 points. These are 14 ways to prevent a World War II, all right, to make sure this never happens again. Stuff like, hey, let's not have these massive military buildups. Let's have freedom of the seas. Let's not have secret alliances. Let's do all this other stuff. And then at the very end, all right, of all these logical things to prevent countries from getting mad at each other and causing another war like this, he throws in something that's kind of a wild card. He doesn't think the rest of the countries are going to be cool with it, but he just wants to fill it out. It's a thing called the League of Nations. It's his 14th point. The 14th point, League of Nations, says all the countries join one military alliance. If it's big public military alliance, if you attack one of those countries in that military alliance, all those countries will attack that one country. By setting it up this way, he thinks it's going to intimidate countries from wanting to start a war. So, but he's like, man, these guys are probably so tired of war. They probably don't want to talk about a military alliance. So he thinks the 14th point maybe won't be accepted. But he's like, the first 13, everybody's going to love those because why wouldn't they? It's going to prevent another war. The question here is, why was Germany not allowed to even attend the Treaty of Versailles? The reason is, and we're going to find this out here shortly, England and France want to punish Germany. They don't want them to have any say-so. England and France are very angry at Germany and don't really want to talk to them. They just want to punish them afterwards. So there's no point in Germany even being there. This is a photograph of the big 4 that are at the Treaty of Versailles. You got David Lloyd George right here. He is the leader of England. You got Orlando here. He's the leader of Italy. Clemenceau, it's pronounced completely differently than it's spelled. So, you know, that's a French dude. And then you got Woodrow Wilson here. America. All right. So these are the 4 guys that are going to make all these decisions here at the Treaty of Versailles. Woodrow Wilson thinks he's going to be treated as a hero when he shows up here in Europe. And generally he is. So when he shows up, there's parades and stuff for him. Hooray. This guy represents America who came in and won this war. Hooray. So he's high-fiving, glad-handing everybody as he goes through, shows up at the Versailles Palace for this Treaty of Versailles. And he gets there, and there's Italy, England, and France are already there waiting on him. All right. And so he gets in. He's like, hey, guys, I got some stuff for you. It kind of catches everybody off guard because they're like, wait, you're planning on talking? And Woodrow Wilson's like, yeah, what were y'all thinking was getting ready to happen? They're like, oh, nothing. No, look, let's hear what you have to say. All right. So it starts out real weird to begin with. And Woodrow Wilson's like, all right. So I got these 14 points because, as we all know, we never want this to happen again. And England and France is like, you're correct. You're correct. Go ahead. He's like, first thing, I think everybody should have a limited military. And England and France are like, nope, veto that one because we want a big military so we can beat up on Germany. And he's like, oh, what? Oh, okay. I think we should have freedom of the seas. And they're like, nope, we don't want freedom of the seas because we want Germany to not have freedom of the seas. So we're against it. And he starts getting concerned. He goes through his next points of like no secret alliances and stuff. And they're like, no. We want to have all the secret alliances that we can have against Germany because, you know, we don't like Germany now. We hate them and they have to pay. He goes through every one of these, his first 13 points that are supposed to prevent another war. And they're all like, nah, not cool with that. We're going to ignore all those first 13 points because that doesn't allow us to abuse Germany and kick them while they're down like we plan on. And then he gets to his last point. He's like, well, all right, I guess, and this is kind of weird now. So I had this League of Nations thing where we'd all join a big military alliance, but I mean, you guys don't like the other points, so I can't imagine you like that. And they're like, wait a minute. There's like a big military alliance. Are you going to be in it? And Wilson's like, I mean, I was planning on it. They're like, yes, let's create a military alliance called the League of Nations, which America is in. So if we decide to attack Germany, it forces America to attack them too. So this completely catches Woodrow Wilson off guard. He's like, wait, what? No, that's not what it's designed for. So the League of Nations ends up being a thing that America comes up with. We want to use it as a peacekeeping idea. Here, I got some stuff here. We want to use it as a peacekeeping way to prevent another war. When we realize England and France only want to use it to bully Germany, we actually turn against the League of Nations. So England and France love the idea of a League of Nations, and they're actually going to take it and make it. They're actually going to make a League of Nations, and they're going to invite us to it, America. It was our idea. And America's going to be like, nah, we ain't joining that thing because our idea was it was supposed to prevent a war. The way they're interpreting it, it looks like it's going to make a war. So completely not cool with that. So the only one of his 14 points that is accepted is the League of Nations. So the question here is, why would England and France support the League of Nations? They support it because they think it's a way of forcing America to help them bully Germany. Because they can, if they attack Germany and we're in the League of Nations, it would force us to also attack Germany. Knowing that, and knowing that's their logic, we decide we're not going to join the League of Nations. This is some of the 14 points here. Don't worry about it. It's kind of political mumbo jumbo. It's just talking a lot about the freedom of the seas, limited military buildup, and things like that. So after all of his points gets rejected, England and France are like, fine. You got anything else to say? And Woodrow Wilson's like, I guess not. Now, Italy, they've been quiet over here in the corner. Italy is just going to side with whatever England and France say all the time. They never side with America. Because what's the only reason Italy switched sides and got in this war to begin with? Is to get stuff. They think, hey, England and France want to punish Germany. You know what's a real fun way of punishing Germany? Taking all their stuff. So Italy's going to side with England and France, hoping they get all the stuff from Germany. So the Treaty of Versailles, this is what actually gets created and made, and it is very unfair to Germany. It creates 9 new nations. It basically breaks apart the Ottoman Empire and creates the Middle East that we have today with Iraq, Iran, and the countries in the Middle East, which we have a lot more issues with those as we get further in this course. Germany has to give Alsace-Lorraine back to France. Anything that Germany had, like Alsace-Lorraine goes to France, all their territories around the world get given to Italy. Once all that is said and done, then, and this is where it starts getting crazy. This made Germany pay reparations, right, or war damages in the amount of $33 billion back to England and France. So basically, they blame Germany for every bad thing that happened in the war, and Germany has to pay $33 billion back to them. This is like imaginary money at the time. Like billion? You mean 33 million? That's a lot of money. Like, no, not million, billion. 33,000 million. That's how much 33 billion is. 33,000 million is what you owe us back. And they're like, what? That is utterly ridiculous. Not only that, anything that Germany had that made money, like Alsace-Lorraine or their territories around the world, all that got taken from them. So it's like they got fired from their job and then mandated to pay back all this money. If they can't do that, England and France can invade them. So there's a lot of tension here. Not only would tensions already be high, this right here, the where is it at? I got the war guilt clause is around here somewhere. One of the most, I don't know, do I not have it written down here? That's kind of a bummer. Because this is a really important part about the Treaty of Versailles. It's called the war guilt clause. This is a document that Germany is required to sign. It says, I, Germany, am responsible for everything that bad that has happened in this war. Your grandmother fell down some stairs, broke her hip, puppy died, anything? Germany's fault. Like, Germany has to take full responsibility for, like, anything bad that happened during World War I. And it's basically just forcing them to say, I'm a loser. This is a jerk move. This does not in any way, shape, or form benefit England or France. They just want to kick Germany while they're down. This type of disrespect causes a whole bunch of hostility in Europe between these countries. So while the Treaty of Versailles should technically end this war, all it does is just causes a lot of animosity between these two countries after World War I. That's going to simmer, and it will eventually lead to World War II. So why is it nearly impossible for Germany to pay back their reparations? The reason this is impossible is because Germany doesn't have any more money. Like, they've already lost all their money in the war, and then anything they have that would make money, they got taken from them. Then they're being told they have to pay this stuff back, and if they don't, really bad things can happen. So all the yellow area here is France. The red area here is Alsace-Lorraine that got taken from Germany and given back to France. Germany's going to want that back in World War II. All right. So why peace won't last? All right. So I do have it here at the war guilt clause. Good. The war guilt clause is just kicking Germany while they're down. And so we already talked about that. The United States never joins the League of Nations. We realize the Treaty of Versailles is completely unfair to Germany. And we're like, we're not getting involved in y'all's little bullying thing you have with Germany now. We were trying to prevent another issue from happening, but America sees this 1,000 miles away. This isn't going to prevent war. This is more likely going to create another war. So here, why was the war guilt clause nothing but just adding insult to injury for Germany? Because it doesn't benefit England or France at all. All it does is try to make Germany look like the bad guy. All right. It's just kicking Germany while they're down. It's just being a bully. It's just being mean for the sake of being mean. And this is the type of mentality, the vindictiveness that is geared towards Germany that's going to cause a lot of hostilities after World War I. And in part is going to be what allows people like Adolf Hitler to rise to power. This is a good cartoon here. So this is supposed to be Kaiser Wilhelm II, who's the leader of Germany at the time. This is supposed to be Clemenceau, the guy from France. This is supposed to be David Lloyd George, the guy from England. They don't execute him in real life, but this is a cartoon. It's symbolic that England and France are getting ready to execute Germany, All right. And who's trying to talk some reason into them? This is supposed to be Woodrow Wilson, that America is trying to talk these two countries into not executing them. Like, we got to move forward and live together. But England and France are just so furious at Germany because of this war. Keep in mind, America lost a good bit of soldiers. We did. All right. These countries lost an entire generation of young men. The anger that they feel is something that America really hasn't experienced in any war that we've fought in. So it's hard to put ourselves in their shoes to understand why they did this. But this is not good for world peace at all. All right, that's as far as we're going to get today. I will see you guys tomorrow.